Joining us is East Bay Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, and this morning, and pick up the newspaper and find out that actually there appears to be a small bit of agreement in Washington about the border. Congress has approved a $4.5 billion emergency humanitarian money to help the kids, to help what's going on down there. But it had a real tough time getting out of the House among Democrats. What was going on?
Well, it was a long negotiated process. The Senate had passed the bill that we eventually passed. And then at the end, we were getting these news stories about private contractors and the Border Patrol not providing the kind of support for the families and the kids while they wait to get processed. So we added language that we hope to make sure that they would get the proper protection and coverage.
Well, what was the language that was added in order to try to get something done here? What was the tug of war? Democrats were split on this. How could you be split on humanitarian aid?
Well, that's a good question. As somebody who supported the Progressive Caucus, as somebody who's in the Progressive Caucus, we wanted to make sure there was language in there that was enforceable to make sure that the Department of Homeland Security did what it's required by law to do, and the courts are telling them to do, and they've basically been ignoring it in many instances.
But there was others that said, no, let's just get it done, right? Mm-hmm. And they prevailed.
They did.
Why?
I don't have the full inside story, but basically you've got a makeup in Congress where you've got a majority of Democrats, but there are differences within that group. And then the Republicans were going to vote for the Senate bill. So we had to get it done before we left. A lot of us were willing to stay, but the decision was made at the highest levels.
How close did this come to gridlocking?
I think we should stay the weekend and put pressure to get as much of this language in, because we're going to continue to see stories, in spite of the extra money, of us, the U.S., doing things that we shouldn't be doing.
What does this say about Nancy Pelosi and her relationship with the her caucus? Is it split?
It is a split, but that's part of being a legislative leader, and she's good at it. She's had to do this before, but it's a constant effort.
Okay, when we look at this bill and these stories about the children, we are facing this unprecedented at the border. We've never seen children coming across like this. What's behind this? What's pushing this?
Well, the basic problem is what's happened in these three countries, the triangle countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, where the rule of law is broken down, so they're trying to get out. And then there are people who are living in poverty down there. There's a story in the New York Times today about the family the picture is in the paper, the father and the son floating. They were making $300 a month, so they wanted to get into the United States. They probably wouldn't have been granted asylum.
Okay. But we've had this situation in Central America for some time. What changed on our side that made these kids suddenly attracted for them to come up?
No, the situation is worse in these three countries. Some of it's because we've been successful in Colombia of reestablishing the rule of law and getting the cartels to a point where they're controllable. This is a problem that has changed, and we've got to adapt to it, and we're not doing a good job. There is a legitimate issue at the border. There's too much volume for our infrastructure and our personnel to be able to process.
Because a couple of months ago, we were being told, or I was reading in the newspaper, that it's a manufactured crisis. And then all of a sudden it isn't. What is it?
Well, I think it is manufactured in the sense that the president has done it, from my view, deliberately to stoke racial divide in this country, and he's doing it quite deliberately.
Are other people deliberately denying it?
I don't think so. I think if we had a functioning federal government and a functioning administration in Congress, we would sit down, negotiate a bipartisan deal. There's one bill, the Hurd-Aguilar bill that I've told you about before, that would do that and would solve a lot of the larger problems.
That's if it's enforced.
That's right.
And this goes to history. We have repeatedly done these compromises about immigration, quote unquote, reform, and then the minute we pass them, and they say, okay, and now it's time to start enforcing it. It all falls apart.
Yeah, this is something that's unique. I mean, immigration has been part of this country since it was founded, before it was founded, when people came from Europe on the Mayflower. I mean, people have immigrated from here. So we've struggled with this. When the Irish and the Italians, we struggled with that. That was really open borders. Then there were quotas established based on which country it came from. So it's always part of the American history to deal with immigration. We need to deal with it on a policy level and stop making it a political issue.
But you have politics, you have policy, but I'm going to again say it. We had a compromise worked out between Kennedy and, was it Bush, years ago. And there was going to be a road to amnesty and all that other stuff, and everybody said, we've solved it, and we never
enforced it. Actually, it was Reagan.
Reagan, that was Reagan.
And the argument against what they did then was it created amnesty. So the argument is the right is, well, that'll just encourage people to come here if they know that this
it kind of reminds me of Bart. We pass all these rules, and then everybody just passes through, and you go, okay, now we've got a problem on the trains.
Yeah, but there's been countless examples in the history of this country where we got it right. So there's countless ones where we got it wrong, and this is one of those instances.
And if we'll get at that in a little bit, because every time we get it right, some people say we get it wrong, and every time we get it wrong, some people say you got it right.
Welcome to democracy.
Thank you very much, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier.